Good afternoon, you are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Hasanov and let's see the top stories. American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander reunites with his family after 19 months in captivity. European countries call for a ceasefire as a necessary condition to secure peace between Russia and Ukraine. Asian markets surge after U.S.-China trade agreement alleviates investors' worries. An Israeli-American soldier held hostage by Hamas for 19 months has been released during a temporary pause in fighting. But soon after, Israeli strikes resumed across the Gaza Strip.
After 19 months in captivity, 21-year-old Israeli-American soldier Eden Alexander has been freed by Hamas and reunited with his family. The International Committee of the Red Cross facilitated his transfer, with Israel briefly pausing its military operations to allow the handover. Shortly after reuniting with his family, Alexander was taken to an Israeli military facility and then flown to hospital. His condition was described as weak but stable. His release followed mediation by the US, Egypt and Qatar. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the release came as a result of sustained military pressure in Gaza and diplomatic efforts led by US President Donald Trump.
This is a very emotional moment. Eden Alexander has returned home. We embrace him and his family. This was achieved thanks to our military pressure and the diplomatic pressure exerted by President Trump. This combination is a winning formula. I spoke today with President Trump. He told me, I am committed to Israel. I am committed to continuing to work in close coordination with you, to achieve all our war objectives, to release all the hostages, and to defeat Hamas. These goals go hand in hand. They are interconnected.
Shortly after the handover, Israeli strikes resumed across Gaza. Palestinian authorities reported casualties in Khan Yunis and in northern areas, including at shelters housing displaced families. Israel says it had targeted Hamas fighters planning attacks. Hamas described the release as a goodwill gesture toward President Trump, who is visiting the Middle East region this week. Trump, in turn, welcomed the development and expressed hope that more hostages would soon be freed.
We hope that we're going to have other hostages released too, as you know, so.
The deal has sparked criticism within Israel. Some families of remaining hostages accuse the government of favoring captives with foreign backing, calling for a broader agreement to secure the release of all 58 still held in the Strip.
But President Trump, please don't stop. Don't leave us alone. This is only the first step. Do whatever is necessary to bring every last one home. The other 58 hostages have no time left. They are in hell. The living could be killed any day. The deceased, their bodies could be lost forever.
Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate. Israel resumed its military campaign in March after a ceasefire, tightening its control and cutting off aid. 2 million residents now face extreme food shortages, according to the United Nations. A global hunger monitor warns that 500,000 people are at risk of starvation and famine, could hit by September if aid does not resume.
Germany says that there can be no peace talks without a ceasefire in Ukraine. European foreign ministers met in London to coordinate further support for Kiev as pressure mounts on Moscow.
A truce is the first condition for any negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. That's according to the German Foreign Minister Johann Wadefuhl. He made the comment in London on Monday as European foreign ministers met to discuss strong support for Ukraine. He says that Kiev is ready for peace talks, but the next move must come from Moscow.
This is a crucial week in which we can take a step forward towards peace negotiations. In our view, the prerequisite for this is that there must first be a ceasefire. This has been clearly articulated. Ukraine is ready for this. President Zelensky has taken a big step forward, and the expectation of President Putin and Russia is that they will now follow suit.
Wadeful also stressed that Germany, along with its European allies, expects Russia to demonstrate a clear desire to end the fighting.
Germany now expects a ceasefire from Russia and then a willingness to negotiate. I am quite sure the European position is clear. It will make it clear that we can have momentum, that Europe can finally return to a situation where peace can prevail.
Foreign ministers from the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Spain met under the Weimar Plus format in UK's capital and issued a joint statement pledging stronger support for Ukraine, saying, "We discussed how we would further step up European efforts to support Ukraine in its ongoing defence against Russia's war of aggression." The group added that Ukraine should remain confident in resisting Russian attacks with continued European backing. The Kremlin insists President Vladimir Putin is serious about peace talks. On Sunday, Putin proposed direct talks with Ukraine aimed at ending the war. And after US President Donald Trump publicly told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to accept, Zelensky said he would, but that Putin should attend the meeting in Istanbul on Thursday in person. Putin and Zelensky last met in December 2019. European leaders visited Kiev at the weekend and have called for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire.
Following an unexpected call by President Donald Trump for Ukraine to accept Russia's invitation for direct peace talks in Turkey, the Ukrainian government has responded with a condition. A 30-day ceasefire must come first. The Kremlin so far hasn't shown interest in preconditions. As European capitals warn of fresh sanctions should Moscow reject the ceasefire condition. Some analysts argue that this diplomatic move could fracture Western unity or delay Ukraine's battlefield objectives. To break this down, we are joined now from Kiev by Andriy Ordonovich, a retired colonel of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and a veteran observer of Ukraine's strategic and military posture. Mr. Ordonovich, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you, sir, for catching up again.
Colonel Ordonovich, Ukraine insists on a 30-day ceasefire before engaging in direct talks with Russia. From a military and strategic standpoint, why is this precondition so critical for Kiev?
First of all, this kind of precondition is needed because for the almost 10 years when the situation started to deteriorate, and we've been faced full-scale invasion, all kind of truce or ceasefire was broken by Russian side. After the President Putin offered 3 days some ceasefire, our president initiative to prolong up to at least 30 days. Why it's so? First of all, it's giving time for the more political and diplomatical efforts to set up this terrible invasion of Russian Federation to Ukraine. Second, it would give us a possibility to prepare a better security, political, and also humanitarian foundation for the lasting and just peace in Ukraine. It is very important to have longer than 3 days, but at least 30 days is the perfect time trying to set all these political, economical, and military dimensions.
So Ukraine's European allies have warned of fresh sanctions if Moscow rejects the truce. Based on past experience, do you believe such economic pressure could realistically force Russia's hand this time?
If you will look at for the 3 years and couple months of this full-scale invasion, probably you will find some real evidence that sanctions from West are working on Russian economy. They are trying to bring better understanding that if they would like to be to have better cooperation economical with Western country and globally, they have to follow appropriate international order. I believe the new sanction, which is about to be introduced by EU with support of NATO, could help from political standpoint to persuade the Russian government to follow the recent initiatives.
Colonel Ordonovich, Turkey has often presented itself as a mediator in this conflict. How do you assess Ankara's neutrality and potential to facilitate meaningful talks between Kiev and Moscow?
Again, our neighbor, Turkey, is a right position to bring both sides, Ukrainian and Russian side, to negotiate, to consult. And we are very much appreciate the offers of Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to have such talks because it be a close vicinity, and this aggression have a negative effect on the region. And Turkey feels personally such, and I believe their offers very positive, very much dynamic and timely, and hopefully this offer would be utilized in the most positive way of both sides.
Colonel Andrei Ordonovich, thank you very much for this discussion. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. All the best. Thank you.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has approved the ratification of the minerals deal with the United States. Ukrainian Parliament ratified the deal on May the 8th, saying the deal will create the U.S.-Ukrainian Reconstruction Investment Fund. The statement says that the document will pave the way to large-scale investments into the Ukrainian economy, including into vital infrastructure, industry, and post-conflict reconstruction projects. The United States and China agreed to slash tariffs on each other's goods for 90 days. The de-escalation breakthrough will see U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports fall from 145% to 30%, while Chinese levies on American goods will fall from 125% to 10%.
The United States and China have agreed to a 90-day pause in their trade war, with both countries committing to sharply reduce tariffs in a bid to ease global market uncertainty and revive economic cooperation. Speaking after high-level talks in Geneva on Monday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the deal, which will see China cut tariffs on U.S. goods from 125% to 10%, while the U.S. will reduce tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%. The revised American levy includes a 10% base rate and an additional 20% tax hike on fentanyl-related products. In a joint statement, both sides have pledged to a long-term and balanced trade relationship. Bessent called the talks robust and said both countries defended their interests well.
The consensus from both delegations this weekend is neither side wants a decoupling. And what had occurred with these very high tariffs, as Ambassador Greer said, was the equivalent of an embargo, and neither side wants that. We do want trade. We want more balanced trade, and I think that both sides are committed to achieving that.
China's Ministry of Commerce described the agreement with the U.S. as a crucial step toward resolving differences and laying the foundation to bridge gaps and deepen cooperation. In a joint statement, both countries announced the creation of a new mechanism to continue discussions on economic and trade relations, led by Scott Bessent and China's Vice Premier, He Lifeng. The statement emphasized that both nations believe ongoing talks could address their respective concerns in the trade relationship. A spokesperson also expressed hope that the U.S. would build on this foundation, continue working with China, and fully correct its unilateral tariff policies. During an interview with CNBC, Bessent stated that he expects to meet with China again in the next few weeks, with the next meeting likely focusing on a more comprehensive agreement. He also mentioned that they would work on addressing non-tariff barriers and expressed confidence that China is now committed to stopping the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. After the agreement, European shares also climbed, giving investors hope that a full-scale trade war might be avoided. The breakthrough follows a steep escalation in April, when President Donald Trump raised tariffs on Chinese goods to 145%, reigniting tensions in a trade conflict that began in 2018. China responded with its own levy increases, further straining global trade and the economic relationship between the world's two largest economies.
Asian stocks rallied and the US dollar held on to most of its gains on Tuesday. It's after the US and China agreed to slash steep tariffs for 90 days, easing fears of a global recession. Japan's Nikkei soared 2%, reaching its highest level since the 25th of February, while tech-heavy Taiwan's index also climbed 2%. Chinese stocks also edged higher in early trading. This lifted MSCI's broadcast index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan to a 6-month high. Earlier, the S&P 500 rose more than 3%, and the Nasdaq jumped 4.3%. China has pledged nearly 10 billion in yuan-denominated credit to Latin American and Caribbean nations, showing a united front with Latin America. President Xi Jinping made the announcement at the opening of the China CELAC Forum in Beijing on Tuesday, a platform aimed at strengthening regional ties. Xi said the funding would support development and warned that no one wins in tariff or trade wars. The forum is seen as a direct challenge to long-standing U.S. economic and political influence in the region. It comes just days after high-level trade talks between China and the United States concluded on a positive note.
霸凌霸道只会孤立自身.
There are no winners in tariff wars and trade wars. Bullying and tyranny will only isolate oneself. China and Latin American and Caribbean countries are important members of the global south. Independence and self-reliance are our glorious traditions. Development and revitalization are our natural rights. Fairness and justice are our common pursuits.
是我们的天然权利.
U.S. President Donald Trump was welcomed by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman when he arrived in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. It's for the first leg of his 4-day visit to the Middle East. The Gulf trip will also include Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and is expected to focus more on economic deals than security crisis. Trump is expecting to secure trillions of dollars of investments from the Gulf oil producers. The American president also made Saudi Arabia the first major visit of his first term, breaking with the tradition of visiting the UK, Canada or Mexico. Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth are both traveling with the president. In his first speech after the ceasefire, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi stated that military action against Pakistan is only paused and could resume if another terror attack happens. The statement has drawn sharp criticism from Pakistani lawmakers, with Islamabad calling it provocative and irresponsible. Analysts stress that the nuclear-armed nations in the region must demonstrate maturity and wisdom, as any misstep could jeopardize the stability of South Asia. Hira Mustafa reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan's defense minister has strongly criticized Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi following his first public remarks after a US-brokered ceasefire between the two South Asian rivals last week. In a statement, the Pakistani minister accused Modi of promoting terrorism globally, specifically citing alleged Indian involvement in targeting Sikh activists abroad, including in Canada. He went as far as labeling the Indian Prime Minister a certified terrorist who foments instability beyond India's borders. Prime Minister Modi's comments came in the wake of Indian military strikes last week on what New Delhi claimed were terrorist camps across the border. Citing the Indus Treaty's suspension, Prime Minister Modi said terror and talks cannot go together, terror and trade cannot go together, and water and blood cannot flow together, a comment that has angered Islamabad. Pakistan, however, denies the presence of militant infrastructure in the targeted areas and insists that Indian strikes hit civilian locations. The two countries had already strained ties, and the recent escalation threatened to spiral out of control until the United States intervened to broker a ceasefire. Following the ceasefire, both countries' Director Generals of Military Operations agreed on Monday to halt any crossfire and scale down forces at the line of control. Pakistan's foreign minister has confirmed a second round of military and diplomatic talks is expected within 48 hours. While Islamabad has welcomed U.S. mediation, India has so far refrained from acknowledging any third-party involvement. Experts argue that third-party intervention is critical in the absence of a formal bilateral escalation control mechanism between the two countries. Pakistan has outlined 3 key issues it insists must be addressed in any future dialogue: terrorism, the Indus Water Treaty, and the status of disputed territory of Kashmir. With both nations maintaining hardened positions, analysts stress the importance of continued international mediation to prevent further conflict between the two nuclear-armed states. Hera Mustafa for A News, Islamabad.
The International Civil Aviation Organization has ruled that Russia violated international air law in the 2014 downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. ICAO's council said Russia failed to meet its obligations under the Chicago Convention, which prohibits using weapons against civilian aircraft. The ruling followed the case by Australia and the Netherlands over the shooting down of MH17 over eastern Ukraine. A full decision document will be released later. Kazakhstan's transport ministry says that the final report on the Azerbaian Airlines crash near Aktau will be published once the full investigation is complete. Officials stress that the inquiry is proceeding according to international standards. The field investigation phase has already wrapped up, and the preliminary report was released earlier this year. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan's main transport prosecutor's office has declined to share any new details, citing legal restrictions on disclosing investigative data during ongoing proceedings. This declaration marks a significant moment in the pursuit of accountability in international aviation law. While the political and legal consequences are still unfolding, the ICAO's decision carries both symbolic weight and potential implications for future airspace safety and state responsibility. Does the ICAO ruling on MH17 signal about the global aviation community's readiness to confront politically sensitive incidents? To discuss this, I'm joined by Andrei Guk, an aviation lawyer. Mr. Guk, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hello.
Andrei, Russia has consistently denied involvement in MH17. How might this ICAO decision affect Russia's position or its international standing within aviation bodies and beyond?
Actually, it's not the first move by ICAO against Russian Federation, because back in 2022, ICAO already imposed red flag to Russia, and only few states in the world has the status of the state that is not capable to provide air safety for civil aircraft. It's like Congo and actually, that's it. Besides, Russia was dropped off from the Council of ICAO also in 2023 and was not re-elected to this Council of ICAO. And now, yesterday, ICAO Council, first time in history, provided a decision on merits of the dispute and recognized that Russia violated Article 3 bis that forbids any use of weapon against civil aircraft on the flight. So it's like unprecedented decision, and in fact and in law, Russia is deemed to be violated the Chicago Convention. What are the consequences? Of course, Russia is denying even this decision and denying the ICAO Council ruling. But now we can say that eventually all states that are involved in international civil aviation knows what happened, and Russia is responsible despite all the rejection. And eventually, probably when it will be some changes in Russia, but this decision still will be enforced, and Russia will have to pay compensations to those states involved, in particular Netherlands and Australia, and to victims, relatives of the victims. So eventually we can expect that the variety of different international decisions, Hague Court decision, ICAO Council and International Court of Justice, and numerous sanctions of all the states all over the world will eventually result in responsibility that Russia will have to bear and have to pay.
So turning to the recent Azal crash in Kazakhstan's Aktau, how relevant is the International Civil Aviation Organization's MH17 ruling when evaluating new investigations like this?
Sure, what we can say is that the Russian weapon was the reason of few aircraft crashes over past years. It's MH17, it's Iranian crash of Ukraine International Airlines, it was also Russian missile, and now Azal air crash, also Russian weapon. And we should understand that Russia also denies everything, and what Azerbaijan has, what instrument it has, it already announced that Azerbaijan is preparing international claim, probably to International Court of Justice, and probably ICAO Council now showed that it is also the body that can resolve some dispute between Azerbaijan and Russian Federation if Russian Federation will fail to recognize its responsibility for this crash. And now we see that they are trying to switch the responsibility to possible drone attack that Ukraine conducted over this time. But Azerbaijan understands and Kazakhstan understands that this is the issue of air defense coordination, and it was Russian missile, because we see the preliminary report. And even now, what information we have that missile fragment samples are analyzed in Brazil, and some test flights of Embraer are scheduled in June, and we can expect the final report at the end of the year. According to ICAO rules, this final report should be delivered within a year after aircraft crash, and we can actually, even now we can say that probably it will establish that a Russian air defense system was involved in external damage to the aircraft, and that was the reason of this crash. And of course, ICAO Council and the International Court of Justice, those are ways for Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to force Russia to recognize its responsibility.
Andrei, thank you very much for talking to A News. We appreciate your time. The PKK is disbanding. The group has announced an end to its 4-decade armed struggle. Presented as part of a new peace process with Ankara, the decision is seen as a turning point for regional stability.
The Kurdistan Workers' Party has decided to end its armed struggle and disband after 4 decades. The decision, made during its 12th Congress, is part of a peace process initiated by Turkey. This follows a call from PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan in February to lay down arms. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan called the decision historic and stressed that concrete steps for disbandment must be taken and closely monitored.
On this issue, I think if this decision is implemented sincerely and enacted in a way that will eliminate other concerns, it will be a very good decision for our future, our citizens, for everyone.
Herkes için çok hayırlı bir karar olacağını düşünüyorum.
Syria's Foreign Minister Asad Hassan al-Shibani called the PKK's decision to end armed struggle and disband a critical moment for regional stability, highlighting its importance for both Turkey and the broader region's security.
On behalf of the Syrian Arab Republic, we congratulate the Turkish government and its people on their recent agreement with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. This step marks a pivotal moment, not only for Turkish internal security, but also for the stability of our whole region. The success of this effort reflects the main goals we've gathered for today: restoring security, safeguarding sovereignty, and ending the continuous cycles of violence in our region.
The PKK, which began its armed insurgency in 1984, resulting in nearly 40,000 deaths, economic damage and social tension. Its decision to end armed struggle will impact not only Turkey, but also Kurdish-inhabited areas in Iraq and Syria. This move is seen as a pivotal step toward ending the long-standing conflict and ushering in a new phase of stability.
Turkey's role in regional connectivity and energy diplomacy is once again in the spotlight. The Secretary General of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization, Ambassador Lazar Komanescu, says the Black Sea region is increasingly vital to intercontinental ties, and Turkey is at the heart of the Middle Corridor and regional energy initiatives. The Black Sea region is becoming more strategic in global trade and energy connectivity. Ambassador Lazar Komanescu, Secretary General of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization, says the Middle Corridor is gaining momentum and Turkey plays an active leading role in this process.
Many initiatives which we have been developing within the organization, like the Black Sea Ring Highway or the motorways of the sea, or cooperation in the area of energy and so on. Turkey has had a lot of initiatives in this respect, and just to come closer to our times, you may wish to know, and I am particularly glad that under the Turkish chairmanship in office of this organization, in December 2023, we have been able to adopt a new strategy, a new basic economic agenda, which is setting up our priorities and lines of action for the next decade. And that speaks by itself about what the role of Turkey has been, and I'm absolutely convinced that Turkey would continue to have a most valuable contribution to the promotion of the objectives of the Black Sea Economic Organization.
Komanescu emphasized the rising interdependence between nations and the region's growing importance as a transit hub connecting Europe with Asia and the Middle East.
The Asian region, Asia and Pacific, are becoming the real engines of the global economy, and that means for that we need connectivity, and you cannot speak about connectivity between Europe and Asia without the Black Sea. This is why we in the Black Sea have been promoting several initiatives aimed at highlighting and asserting more the role of the organization in this respect.
The BCEC also supports new energy projects. From clean energy transfer to gas exploration, regional cooperation is expanding.
As you know, there have been other initiatives like the so-called green cable transport of energy, clean energy from Azerbaijan through Georgia, Black Sea, Romania, and Hungary. In between, there are, negotiations and talks among Turkey and other countries in the region, like, Romania, for example, and Bulgaria, looking into how to explore and exploit energy resources in the Black Sea, like gas and so on.
With 13 member countries and a combined population of 350 million, the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization sees the region as a global hub, both as a market and a gateway. From energy corridors to transport highways, the Black Sea continues to shape the future of regional integration. And as Ambassador Komanescu underlines, Turkey is right at the center of this transformation. As global trade routes revolve, the middle corridor running from China through Central Asia, across the Caspian Sea, through the South Caucasus and into Europe is gaining renewed geopolitical and economic relevance. With disruptions to traditional transport corridors via Russia and the increasing strategic value of diversified logistics chains, China's engagement in the South Caucasus is no longer limited to economic cooperation. It now extends to infrastructure, digital connectivity and regional influence. But what are China's real interests in the South Caucasus? And how does Beijing view the region's role in the broader Belt and Road Initiative? To help us unpack these dynamics, we are joined by Eunice Sharifli, non-resident fellow at the China Global South Project, specializing in China's relations with Central Asia and the South Caucasus. He joins us from Istanbul, Turkey. Mr. Sharifli, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Sharifli, how does China perceive the strategic value of the South Caucasus within the broader framework of the Middle Corridor and the Belt and Road Initiative?
So, thank you very much for this question. As you know, since 2022, the Middle Corridor strategic importance increasing not just for China, but also for the European Union, generally for the Western countries. But particularly in the context of China, there's a two important reasons that why South Caucasus and Central Asia, but general Middle Corridor, the strategic importance increased for China. The first is about the risky business actually in the maritime routes, particularly when we look at the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. It's one of the important factors that affect China's strategic consideration, because traditionally they already consider that dependence on maritime route is risky, but these new events in the last 2 years shows that dependence on maritime the route is still risky and they need to diversify. The second important read is about actually Russia-Ukraine war. Despite China sustaining its trade with European land-based trade with the European Union through the Russia. However, the war shows that dependence on also one country for the land-based trade is also risky. So in this context, when we look these two the events in the global system, we saw that why Middle Corridor increases strategic importance for the China. This is related to China's diversification strategy. And second, it's also important that China increase its interest to South Caucasus and Central Asia, because there is a growing market. And we know that Chinese companies look for the new export markets and engagement and cooperate with these countries. Particularly when we looked at United States currently follow America First strategy and hasn't got a lot interest to South Caucasus and Central Asia, China sees the condition as an opportunity. That's why it accelerates its strategic engagement with both South Caucasus and Central Asia.
So how do local governments in the South Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Georgia and Armenia approach their relationships with China? Are there notable differences in their strategies?
Yes, absolutely. I will say that Azerbaijan and Georgia particularly is the most proactive one, and as we see just approximately a month ago, Azerbaijan and China signed comprehensive strategic partnership. The agreement, which is very important because it transformed the current relationship to another the agreement or the relationship, because we saw that there's a more detailed project currently discussed between the both countries. And what we see particularly in the China and Azerbaijan, they focus on renewable energy, digitalization, connectivity, particularly in the context of the Middle Corridor. In the second, I would say it's Georgia, particularly try to engage with China, export more product to Chinese market, because as you know, is the vast market in the world. The second important, Georgia is also interested in Georgia because they also want to attract investment for infrastructure. As you know, currently China only bidder for the construction of deep sea port, the called Anakya in Georgia. And we saw that both countries follow the proactive diplomacy. But in terms of Armenia, what I see the current administration actually follow more Western-oriented foreign policy and less interested in this cooperation with China. So in general, I would say that Azerbaijan, the Georgia is the leading country in the South Caucasus to eager to engage with China.
Mr. Sharifli, thank you very much for talking to A News. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Azerbaijan and the European Union have discussed expanding energy cooperation, focusing on the supply of natural gas, green energy and hydrogen to European countries. Azerbaijani Energy Minister Perviz Shahbazov shared the update after meeting with Gerd-Jan Koopman, the EU's Director General for Neighborhood and Enlargement negotiations. Talks also covered the development of energy corridors, investment opportunities and the future of the Azerbaijan-EU energy dialogue, as both sides look to strengthen Europe's energy security. Kazakhstan and the United Arab Emirates are deepening their strategic partnership. During the visit of the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi to Astana, dozens of agreements were signed. Our Fariza Kalimurzana has more.
Kazakhstan and the United Arab Emirates have signed more than 20 commercial agreements totaling $5 billion. The deals were concluded during the official visit of Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan to Astana. The two sides agreed on cooperation in transportation, the digital transformation of the oil and gas sector, expansion of the merchant fleet, and the implementation of round-the-clock energy supply projects. One of the flagship initiatives is the construction of a 1 gigawatt wind power plant in the Jambul region by the UAE-based company Masdar. The project is valued at $1.4 billion. Once fully operational, the wind farm is expected to generate over 3.4 billion kilowatt hours of electricity annually, helping reduce carbon dioxide emissions by around 2 million tons. The IT sector saw agreements amounting to $250 million. These include plans to build a supercomputing cluster and a data center in Kazakhstan. According to the Castrate Center for Trade Policy Development, bilateral trade between the two countries reached $277 million in 2024. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev noted that the United Arab Emirates is among the top 10 foreign investors in Kazakhstan's economy. Last year, investment from the Emirates more than doubled, exceeding $1 billion. The partnership between the two countries continues to grow across energy, transport, logistics, and digital infrastructure. The Crown Prince also expressed the UAE's readiness to deepen cooperation in logistics, including airport development and digital modernization. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzana, A News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.